And so it is on the science of Vaastu Shaastra in town planning, and it's going to be presented by Mona and Sashikala. So I'll introduce Mona and then she can introduce Sashikala. So Mona came to Oroville in 1987 as a student intern and has been living here since 1990. She has an architecture degree from Sept Ahmedabad and a master's in appropriate technology from Germany, where she studied building biology. Since 1995, she has her independent architecture, interior design and landscape studio in Oroville.
Okay.
Okay, welcome Mona.
Thank you. Okay.
Wait, just one precision. Sashi is going to join us on Zoom. Okay, so she's not physically here.
Oh, yes. Okay. So last session, I hope it's going to be short. This came about in the last 2 days only. And thanks to Omar and he's done this wonderful job of putting people next to each other. Don't try to hide. And it's very good, I think, so we can all now zoom out a bit and zoom in again, and it's great. So somebody asked me about 4 days ago, what is the relationship of the town plan or galaxy plan of Oroville vis-a-vis Vaastu Shastra? And since I'm known to have a little bit of interest in this field, I was asked, and I said, okay, as part of the Dreamweaving, I think this layer should also go onto the soundscape, or I don't know, to the raga that we are creating. And therefore, I put this together very quickly. So, and I'm no expert of Vaastu Shastra. I'm just scratching the surface. I've just started about 15 years ago, maybe, to scratch the surface, and I'm still scratching the surface, like any other science, especially in the Indian system, whether it's dance, music, Vastu, rhythm, whatever you take it, you have to, there's that famous saying, you start one thing and then you have to look at rhythm, you look at rhythm, you have to look at dance, you look at dance, you have to look at music. So this is a never-ending discovery. And I'm extremely happy and enjoying it. And I think Sashi has been the catalyst for me. And therefore, we invited her to come and join us. And luckily, we have Radhika and Shivangi. They are also students of Sashi. They've recently joined Oroville. I mean, in the context of my context, but they are 6 years here. And so it's nice to have them here as well. Okay, it's very short. It's about 15, 20 slides. So, is it going next? Yeah. So, Lata's last slide and my first slide is the same, because this is the most important sentence in Oroville, I think. And we want to be the bridge between the past and the future. I'll read it again because it's still so important. And taking advantage of all discoveries from within and without, and Oroville will boldly spring towards future realizations. So, I know that Vastu may mean a lot of things for a lot of people. I'm just going to put forward my understanding of Vastu. Vastu is a collective and evolutionary knowledge system evolved over many centuries in India. Unfortunately, it has fallen into bad repute since the British system of education, sorry, David, but that was adapted for architecture schools, ignored this knowledge system, as in many other disciplines. As a result, was it understood as Vaastu Shastra in India today is a very small part that has been taken over mainly by astrologists and has lost its vastness and become a superstitious traditional system. Astrology is only one of the starting points of Vaastu Shastra. It's a point that is used in the scientific analysis to arrive at a result that is climate-specific, client-specific, function-specific, and site-specific. It's a highly mathematical science. So it also takes a huge amount of what Omar was going to talk about, the bioclimatic design. Actually, Vastu includes all of that in a very comprehensive manner. It is not the same for every region, and it is not Feng Shui. Many people tell like that. I don't know Feng Shui, but I know a little bit of what Vastu is. So every state in India had a different Shastra, and it developed according to the local context. And it showed ways, and I'll just show you a couple of examples how it goes into details, and at the same time it goes to the vastness. So it's this combination of macrocosm and microcosm, which it beautifully brings together. So my personal journey, so for years I worshipped at the altar of golden ratio. And as we all are, probably all of us who have studied in any formal education system in architecture, this will be one of our altars. At least for me, it was. I did this form, structure, and energy, which was a study of the Great Pyramid in Matra Mandir in 1990. This was my diploma thesis in Sept. And it shows how the Great Pyramid and the Shaligram and the inner chamber have a relationship which is mathematical. And this was my great discovery, not my personal discovery, but my study actually. And I have to say that also Roger didn't know about this when he put forward this Shaligram shape. It was on the book cover of a Tantra art by Ajit Mukherjee. And as we know, Roger, he was an amazing, person with aesthetic sense and form, sense for form and beauty. And he just saw this, he loved this form, and he took this form and put it for Matri Mandir, which actually many years later somebody discovered, Patricia Norelli Bachelet. She was working with a lot of numbers and astrology, and she's written books, The Gnostic Way of Being, etc. And she discovered this relationship, and Piero was working with this, and I kind of put it in my thesis and did a lot of research around it. Anyway, also all this is based on the golden proportion. And in my personal journey, so we are told in our first year in architecture's frozen music. It took me about 15 years to understand that and kind of get a glimpse of it. I had a cottage restaurant in Pondicherry, which I designed, and I coincidentally, by chance, discovered that it is a golden section. The whole site was a perfect golden section. And I looked into the modular, and I studied Corbusier in depth, and I started seeing how he took, where he took the liberties and where he, stuck to it. So nothing is actually fixed, I think this is the beauty. When you go deep into something, then you can step beyond it. But so long as you don't do that, you're stuck by the rules. And that's when I studied Corbusier's buildings in depth and analyzed them, and I realized that he was very free how he interpreted it, There were always some things which you could tweak. So this became my starting point, and I really enjoyed it. And that's when I actually understood that this has a music of its own, This has a rhythm of its own. And I began to understand that there is a raga that you can create, and when that one note goes out eventually. That's the crux of the matter. But it takes you many years, and I'm still kind of discovering that. So I was doing all this, and as a good architect, trying to do what has been taught to us. But then I discovered IID calculations. And this was with Sashikala. And when Sashi came, I know her about 20 years now, maybe a little more. And I invited her for a workshop. I'll just show you later on. And that's when she showed us what IID calculations is. Actually, it starts from astrology, Moolam and Rohini. It starts from your personal astrology. It depends what you're designing. If it's a house, it starts from your personal astrology. If it's a master plan, if it's a town plan, it starts with very different. Depends what you take as your starting point. In this case, it could be Mother, could be Roger, I don't know. We have not studied it in that detail. Anyway, it starts with that. It goes into high mathematics. And what it does, that it gives you a number with which you can start working. So it's not just a golden proportion which you multiply wherever you want in the whole world, but it is something very specific to this project, to this person, to this site, to this function. And I was flabbergasted. I said, my God, I mean, if this can happen, why we are not taught this? Why can't I work? And it's so difficult to now, to get into this because it's not part of our learning experience. So we have to really learn. This is just a very small part of the IID calculation. Even Shashi says that it's a very complex kind of calculations. Anyway, I wanted to say also that it is also there are many different ways of looking at the proportions, and it is very, very grounded, I would say, and yet scientific. So as I said, it is a collective knowledge that is very important in the Auroville context. It's a collective knowledge gathered over centuries. It allows space for the intuitive and the individual within the greater whole. So this is what I always say, in Auroville we are like 2,500 strong individuals. We become strong individuals whether we like it or not if we want to survive in Auroville and enjoy the Leela of Auroville. And then we are doing a collective yoga, and we are doing it by democratic processes. So it is very, very difficult and very unusual, but therefore, so Sri Aurobindo has given us a lot of guidelines also in the foundations of Indian culture, and that was also my starting point. When I started discovering this aspect, I started looking at what Sri Aurobindo has written in the foundations of Indian culture, and I think it should be like a Bible for us, to study that what he has written, because he has delved into this. He has given a big section to architecture. So he describes also in like human cycle, for example, that reason, ethics, and aesthetics, they are the three strong points or three strong perspectives which have to be balanced. And I have noticed this in my work in Auroville and other architects' work in Auroville, that if one becomes more than the other, then you will get a different kind of building. I don't want to say good or bad, but it will show in the end result. So you just give too much importance to aesthetics, you may forget to see what is the reason and the ethics part of it. Similarly, in Vaastu Shastra, they have the concept of Ramyam, Bhogadayam, and Sukha Darshanam. So it is quite, we can go into details with this. I'm not the right person. Sashi would be the right person if you want to go into details with this. But I wanted to put it there that also how Sri Aurobindo has written on this aspect, and he has talked about some of the ancient temples of India and how Indian sthapatis used to work, and how the sacred architecture in Auroville, in India, was always, dedicated to something higher than oneself. Yeah? And I think in Auroville we are dealing with a lot of that, and also beyond that. So then in 2013, I started with the help of a nice grant, a small grant from PCG, the Project Coordination Group, invited Sashi for Inner Space Outer Form. That's what we called it at that time. It was a beginner's course on Vaastu Shastra, and you can see some of our architects who are sitting here. They are also there, and it was quite successful. So this was a very basic beginner's course, but we did go into IID calculations, and we looked at several aspects of Vaastu Shastra. And then again in October 2014, I came with the idea that why not study the Auroville Galaxy master plan in relation to Vaastu Shastra and see what comes up. So in that context, we also visited temples, because I thought that would be amazing if we can go and visit certain buildings that have been created with the principles of Vaastu Shastra, with this science that is behind it, and how do they function, what are the proportions they use. And we also went to Gangaikonda, Cholapuram, Darasuram, and Kumbakonam with Sashikala. So it was a 5-day workshop, and 2 days we visited. And we also visited some people in Kumbakonam, some of the few remaining people who actually still practice Vaastu Shastra as a science as a whole. So with this, we came to the idea with this workshop. You can see, we tried, but it wasn't enough for sure. But what Sashi did come up with was that there was one thing we could do immediately, was to strengthen the southwest corner of Auroville, which is actually the Pitrusthan, which is the wisdom of the ancestors and gurus. And we didn't see anything wrong in doing that, because we can always, use the wisdom of, whoever our gurus are. I mean, in Auroville, it's clear for us as Sri Aurobindo and Mother, but it can also be so many lineages of gurus that because we are working with very subtle energies in Vaastu Shastra. Apart from all the mathematics and everything, it also has something very subtle connected to it. So the best thing I like about Sashi is she's not, she always says, develop yourself as an individual and become that intuitive person that will understand what is the right thing to be done. So it is not about rituals and just about mathematics and about calculus. You can go crazy with all these things, you can end up, I've seen this in Germany a lot, like I studied building biology, and we used to do the thing with the what is it called, like antennas, and look for places of energy and all. By the way, in my thesis, when I did the one on pyramid and Master Mandir, Doshi was my external juror. He was the only person who actually they thought he's the only person who will be able to appreciate something like this, where I'm talking of more subtle energies than. So I had done a lot of Kirlian photography and biometric studies, biometer studies, and I had to put them all in my appendix because SET wouldn't include that as it's not scientific enough, etc. But Doshi was, as we know him, was so curious, and I went with my antenna to the jury, and I demonstrated, look, your front energy, your back energy. And after he asked me, what book do you have? Can I study? And I really admire this aspect of him, that he's always curious and wants to learn more. But I saw in Germany that they go crazy over this, because it's just the mind working on it. And Vaastu Shastra is not just the mind. It is the mind, but it is also beyond the mind. And that is the beauty of India. So at some point, I lost interest in all these antennas and all that, because I saw that the mind can interfere so much with your whatever you want to find. You'll find water here. The antenna can tip if my mind interferes. And to not let your mind interfere means you have to really work on yourself a lot. So at some point I realized it doesn't make sense. So in Vaastu Shastra also, it is a very subtle science, and you have to discover, become sensitive, and you can go beyond that. So this with Manu, and we went to so southwest corner happens to be the Sacred Groves area. And we asked Manu if there was some area that we could use. And then AVI USA became very interested in this, and June Mayhers, and they started planting trees for some of the Aurovillians who had left. And it became actually, Yana was very involved in this. I don't know if she's still here. But so there were many. So they found this, stone, and they put. And today, Manu just sent me these photos yesterday. Thanks, Manu, because I haven't been there since a long time. But so this is how it looks, and it has actually become an energy center, and where people do visit, and they feel connected to it. Okay, just a few things about the galaxy, and so Brahmasthanam in Vaastu Shastra is very important. So this is, and also the north, south, east, west cardinal directions are very important. So here we have also very interesting. I used to think for years, like, why Matre Mandir is not the center, the geographical center of Auroville. But actually the Banyan is the geographical center. And I find it very interesting that in Vastu, they say that the Brahmasthana should never be a building. It should always be kept open. So we have the Banyan, and this is, you can read into it whatever you want. But it is interesting. And of course, also this radiating, kind of, so you have a progressive outer movement, and you have an inner center, which is the anchoring. And I really think that there are very few cities in the world today which has a spiritual center, a modern city that is based on a spiritual center, which is actually our cohesive force, our soul, as we like to call it. And it goes very well with what Vaastu Shastra has also. So they always have this very important concept of the Brahmasthana. The other one, like I told you, is how you connect macro and the microcosmos. And we are talking about Vaastu Shilpa. And I have questioned Doshi many times, not many times, a couple of times, on what he thinks of Vaastu Shastra, because I don't think that it's by chance that his practice is called Vaastu Shilpa. It's not Vaastu Shilpa. Many people get mixed up between Vastu and Vaastu, so those who know Hindi will not. But so this is like Vastu, it is, Vastu is the micro and Vastu is the macro. Yeah, so you can relate it in whatever way. It's a container, and the content, and beyond the content. So this is also very important. And then just small examples how I have understood why I have become more and more enamored with Vaastu Shastra, because I have tried to put it in my own practice. And this is one thing that we have done. We have used this is like biotermite treatment. So for years, as far as I knew, when I came to Auroville, everybody used to say no chemicals in Auroville, at least for pest control. I never heard anybody using. But now I've heard that a lot of people do use. So I never thought that it would be the right thing. It's going to go in our groundwater. So we discovered this, not discovered, actually Sashi gave me this recipe, and I used it, made some little modifications, added some more things than what she said, but it doesn't matter. It's actually how it's about using turmeric, neem oil, and neem cake in a certain proportion with water, and you spread this below your foundation, below your flooring, 30 centimeters all around, inside and outside, at least 1 meter around. And I've used this in 2008. Until now, I have had no termites in any of the places in this particular building, and I've used it often in other buildings also afterwards. So it is very interesting, and I made a DIY and put it on the website so that others can also use it if they want. And this is something we recently, found that everything is about consciousness. And I think we all know, whoever's in Auroville, we don't have to talk about that. It's a given. So how do you cut, like if you have to cut a tree, how do you cut a tree, How can you do it in a manner that is befitting and that is respecting the nature? And I had this thing because I had to cut an old peepal tree which was planted about 25 years ago next to my studio. And it was getting into all the inspection boxes and everything. And it was extremely difficult, first of all, to find somebody who would cut a peepal tree, because all the local people don't like to cut peepal and banyan. And I wanted to do it by hand, anyway, there was no question of getting any other, it was inside the yantra. So I asked Sashi, what can I do? How can I feel it's difficult to cut this huge tree. And then she told me some simple things like, first of all, ask for permission. This is the biggest thing what Vastu has taught me. When you start a place, like you start construction, it's not about any ritual as such, but it is about your consciousness. So you ask for permission to all that has happened on that land before, and all the forces that are acting on that land, you ask for permission that we may be able to build, and we may be built in a harmonious manner. And I feel just this intention is enough, and maybe in Auroville, people see rituals, the word rituals become like, oh, we are not for rituals, we are for the future and all that. But we have our own rituals like anything. So the bonfire is a big ritual, whether you like it or not. It's our way of ritual. It's our way of saying, this is where the community comes together. This is what we like, what we belong, what we feel is right for this place. So everybody has rituals, from eating your breakfast, from the way you lay the table, the way you brush your teeth, everything is a ritual. It's just how you look at it. So ritual is not something bad in itself. The problem is when rituals become stratified and become dogmatic, then it's a problem. But it's how it's about, and where else except, a place like Auroville should definitely be conscious in whatever it does. So they have, all kinds of, they say like how you begin your work, and that's what today morning somebody was talking about, the line of goodwill, that we want to make it in a conscious manner. And I think every building in Auroville should be made like that. And I have tried on my own, some of my sites, I don't always manage, but if you would, I tried in my own studio when I designed it, then every day 8 o'clock in the morning, you go there when the workers come, and you just light an incense and you sit for 5 minutes of meditation, And before they go, you do the same. I can't tell you what a difference it makes. But that requires a little bit of discipline. And also, I know that in India, you put one incense, there is no question. I don't have to explain anything. I don't have to tell them that this is a sacred space or this is what we are doing. We just sit in a circle. It's there. The thing is, they come from the village with all their problems, their daily life, everything. You want to consecrate that space to begin this construction every day. And every day if you bring that, and this was something, I think we did talk about this in the dream catchers. I don't know if we did. We probably did. Anyway, but I haven't been able to follow, but I wish that it would happen. So also in whatever we do, we can bring this. And of course, the 5 elements now, everybody talks about sensorial architecture and all. It's all there, and there's so many interesting things to discover like this in Vaastu Shastra. The people tree, I cut it. And I forgot to finish the story. So yeah, she said you be conscious. And then when I cut it, I put a lamp over there, and for a few days, and I asked for it to, whatever, to give my, whatever, I shouldn't say apologies, but allow me to do that. And it was a difficult process. But it was a huge tree. Yeah, and then now this very important point, yantra. Oh, sorry. Okay, so yantra, I have to say this because at some point Doshiji has said in Auroville that the galaxy plan is a yantra. And this has gone into our collective consciousness. And what is it called? Institutional memory. So I want to know, and I will try to ask him again, maybe you try to ask him. But I tried to ask Sashi this question because it did come up, when we are trying to do. I just did some little research. So yantra is a drawing generally made up of geometric lines that serves to invoke or materialize certain forces. So it is a very precise form. Yeah? In yantra, you cannot change anything. You can't change this angle. And it's also 3D. It is not just 2D. Yeah? Yantra is not. This is amazing. This we saw ourselves in Swami Malai. To make this requires a super master craftsman. We don't realize, but to do this in metal, to cast it, to melt it, to do it over layers, to meet this guy was already amazing. And this kind of people exist everywhere in India, and this is not far from here. This is the people who made the Chola bronzes, Swami Malai. It's still continuing this process today. I found buildings. This is a building that we have visited personally. It's Amarkantak. This is the Sri Yantra temple at Amarkantak. You can see the same form here, the same form here at the top. This is 108 yoginis. So a lot of things to do with numbers. And as we know, their numbers that's what we work with as architects. Geometry is our, base. So there is a lot of things to do with numbers because like the rosary is 108 and 12, and I'm not a numerology person, but there are many things that goes with this. So anyway, this is a temple that is going on for some 40-50 years because they only build on some days when according to them is auspicious. But we don't have to go that far, but things like this exist. I wanted to just bring in the last 2 slides. This is the city plan of Srirangam. So I wanted to say that in India, cities have been designed based on Vaastu Shastra. And they are quite successful even today. You can see Jaipur. This is the famous example, that even you can see the 9, and he just shifted it here. So it's flexible. It's not, nothing is cast in stone, That's what I want to say. It's not like Vastu is, you don't sleep in the southwest corner, you will die, or somebody will fall sick, and all that nonsense which has been told to us. No, it's not this. It's deeper than that. It's much more richer than that. It's more subtle than that. But we don't take the trouble, and unfortunately now today we have also lost the people who will teach us that because it's so many years down the line. Sashi is an exception. So this was it, and then the last slide. So one thing that very unusual in our galaxy plan, there is no directionality. There is no cardinal orientation, So bioclimatic, I would have loved to see Omar's presentation, but we end up with buildings like the town hall which face the west. Because, so we have to deal with that. We have to talk really in detail. How do we deal? Of course, there are always solutions for that. But how does one deal with that? It's not, because it's a circular plan and it's a spiral. It's a very dynamic plan. But how do we? So actually what mother gave was this. And you could have said, yeah, it could have gone in many directions. But yeah, in the end, this is what was approved. So from here onwards, I'm going to hand over to Sashi. I will now just, she's on Zoom. She is in Kotagiri. I want to just read a few lines about, so I can also just, so Sashi actually is a qualified architect from Chennai. I think she studied in SAP Chennai. And she studied 10 years with Ganpati Stapati in Mahabalipuram. And she also studied so Vaastu Shilpa Shaastra, when he was still alive, the original Ganpati Stapati. And she also studied yoga at the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. So, hi Shashi. Can you hear? Yeah, all right.
Yes, I can hear.
I'll just finish a few lines, Sashi. Please bear with me. So she brings together her unique confluence of learning and experience with yoga, mythology, behavioral work, fine arts, Vaastu Shastra, craft, architecture, and human psychology. And she has designed many programs to enable people to bridge the traditional and the modern. She's also written a book, several books on Vaastu Shastra, made a video, amazing video, A Shilpi Speaks. If we ever have time, we can see it during the Dreamweaving process. It's a very beautiful video. And yeah, so she has also been applying her principles, not just talking about it. And this video also got a national award. So the latest undertaking of Sashi and Raghu, her husband, is that they have founded an Ritambara, which is a community dedicated to people who are exploring an alternative way of engaging with life, rooted in the Indic wisdom. So she combines, for me, she manages to combine many different aspects of life, and I've had cooking sessions with Sashi, and I've had, trips with her, and she's really a very rich source of inspiration for me. She's very simple and very straightforward, and it took her 40 years, because I told Sashi tomorrow I'm going to present this, and I've never done this, by the way. I've talked about Vastu in some architectural conferences in the premise of my work, but I've never done a Vaastu Shastra presentation like this, and I was telling her, and she said, don't worry, Mona, it'll just flow. And that's how she is. She's a very flowing, intuitive, and deeply rooted person. So Sashi, it's over to you now. Thanks for coming at short notice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here talking to all of you. And I hope Mona's introduction has already prepared you for some of the things that I will be talking to you about. Some of them which may be connected, some of them which will be slightly different. But before I talk about Vaastu Shastra itself, let me say a few words about my own journey. Why did I walk on this path? What was the reason for me to move away from current modern architecture into studying and exploring and teaching the tradition? There are two reasons to it. One is, of course, my own discontent. Because I'm a post-independence child, and there was a tremendous amount of anxiety in me about the traditions that were being wiped out. And we are talking here about colonizing. Today, of course, it's become very popular to talk about decolonizing, but when I was in my 20s, nobody talked about it. People had sort of swallowed the whole Western upbringing, the whole speaking in English, forgetting about your tradition, all the rest of it. It was all swallowed very quietly, very painlessly, almost as if it didn't exist. But now, of course, many people are questioning it. And one of the things that I encountered was the wisdom of Sri Dharampal. Many of you may have heard of him. Many of you may not have heard of him. He was probably the most important social scientist of this country. in the current era. He was the person who was responsible for recovering many of the traditional data sheets from the British archives, pre-British period, which was wiped out from our historical content. Our books wiped it out. So I studied, we met Dharampalji. We had many conversations with him. And one of the things he told us, we were about 25, 30 of us, all educated in the university systems, erudite in English, probably knowing only our mother tongue. Very few of us knew Samskritam at that time. And he said, the only way this country is going to recover its traditional past is if some of you walk that path. And he said, walking backwards is the most important step, because only then you will bring back the wisdom, the quintessential wisdom, which can be anchored in the future. And he said, otherwise, you're going to be imitating the West, running behind the tail of the West, as he used to call it. And it was a very powerful sort of an inspiration for us. So each of us chose a subject. My husband decided to work with yoga. He studied with Krishnamacharya. I went to Ganapati Stapati to study Vaastu Shastra. Some of my friends went into Vedic mathematics, and some went into traditional weaving and dyeing. Some went into agriculture, and so on. The most critical thing that we found in our 10-year sojourn was that we had been so badly misinformed. The average Indian was made to believe that what was there in the past was completely subservient to an intelligent, educated Western model, that we needed to learn everything from the West. Then you learned from Dharampal that smallpox vaccine actually happened here, and it was hijacked, just like turmeric has been hijacked recently. Then you learned about so many other things that have taken place in this country, which have been quietly forgotten, erased, wiped out. So it was a very powerful journey for us. And in the beginning, there was a lot of hurt, angst, pain, sadness, and a lot of anger. But today I realize that none of that is important. What is important is that this wisdom has to reach people so that they can actually make a choice. Do I want to rediscover, re-engage with my ancestral wisdom? Do I want to acknowledge that I'm standing on the shoulders of my ancestors? Do I want to use this knowledge to create a new tomorrow? I think that's all that is important. So in our quest, we are trying to work with young people. We have about 37 people with us now in our team, and they have been given the wisdom of yoga and Vastu and many other traditions, sister traditions like Ayurveda, Sangeeta, Natya, and so on, where they can pull it together to create a new way of living, which is not subservient to a model that is alien to us. Okay? And this is very critical. So one of the ways in which I believe that we have to look at our contexts is to see how are we honoring our ancestors. And when we say ancestors, we are not just talking about people. We are also talking about the trees and the plants. We are talking about the earth. Because Hinduism, which is Sanatana Dharma, has always honored Mother Earth, Prithvi, the whole concept of Prakriti Mata, which means Mother Nature. And this has to come back. And we are not, like Mona was saying, we are not talking about blind, dogmatic ritual. We are talking about a living ritual, which means an interaction between the energies of the environment and the energies within yourself. So yoga becomes the first step. I work with my energies through that sharpen the tools of observation, which means my faculties, and through that I pick up the energies in the outer. This has become the very, very important procedure. And then when I went to Ganapati Stapati, I realized that there were 64 texts of Vaastu Shastra, and they predate every kind of architectural tradition in the world. It comes back from the Vedic period. And those of you who are familiar with the Itihasa, which is Ramayana and Mahabharata, there are many mentions there of people building houses and cities based on the sensible system of the Vaastu Shastra, including the hut that Sri Rama and Lakshmana built when they went into the forest. It says it was built as per the Vastu tradition. And then you have the whole thing in the Mahabharata of Maya Sabha, where the Asura architect, Shilpi Maya, designs the Indraprastha, the whole town based on the Shilpa Shastra, Vaastu Shilpa Shastra. So the traditions of the Vaastu Shilpa Shastra are what was the basis of Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and all those civilizations, where the module was discovered. And those of you who know your background, the brick, the size of the brick was also a very, very important part of the traditions of Vastu. The size of the brick hasn't actually changed. The sun-baked bricks of Mohenjo-daro, Harappa are almost exactly the same size as we have today. And this module was based on the Angula scale of the Vaastu Shastra. And every part of the town was laid out based on this Angula scale. And Mona was mentioning about our visiting a temple. The temple structure is laid out based on this kind of modular scale. And the module is derived based on the nakshatra, or the birth time of the deity that has been placed there. So I need to say a little bit about astrology here, because I think it's been unnecessarily relegated to the negative quadrant. The reality is that astrology essentially is speaking about time, kala pramana. So when you're talking about time, you're saying through the day, through the month, through the year, through the decade, there are moments when time is powerful, auspicious, and you can use it. This Mangala time, or the Mangala Neram as we call in Tamil, is very critical. And those of you who also have a background in biodynamic farming, lot of traditions from Indian agriculture have been taken into it. And much of it is based on the Panchanga. Panchanga is the Indian calendar, where the moments are actually clearly indicated. And during the day, during the month, during the week, during the year, all those times when the earth is awake. So understanding the moment which is replete with the consolidated energy of Mother Nature is the basis of astrology. In itself, it's perfectly valid. It's when people get into prediction that we get into a little problem. Otherwise, Phaladipika itself says the destiny of the human being can be changed through strengthening the mati. Mati means your higher consciousness, the higher mind. When the higher mind becomes powerful, you can change the nature of your destiny. Okay? So astrology in itself, there's nothing wrong with it. It's the way it is deployed in conjunction with space. So now you have time and you have space. How are you going to bring time and space in such a way that you're creating something in the world outside that is capable of offering good energies, transformative energies, wellness, joy, and so on. Here, I just need to correct a little bit about the triangle that Mona had shown, Bhogadyam, Sukhadarsham, and Ramya. Ramya doesn't mean ethic. Ramya actually means delight. So, when we create in the world outside, if that created object, created building, created thought, whatever the creation may be, if it can embody practicality and usefulness, aesthetics, and a lasting delight, then we have created something that is timeless. This is the basis of Vaastu Shastra. And I believe this enormously powerful traditional wisdom has to be studied, has to be brought into the open. And Sri Aurobindo and the mother, they haven't by accident chosen to create this community in India. It is not because they didn't have any other choices. It is because this soil has a certain power and a certain wisdom. And I believe it is necessary, it is our responsibility to bring this wisdom and this consciousness into everything that we create. Okay? So the next thing I just wanted to add to what Mona was saying, the word yantra or mandala is definitely a geometric, a sacred geometric form, but it is also very specific with the what is known as the Ashta Dikpalaka, which means the 8 directions. The 8 directions have been very important in the tradition. Where do you sit? How do you face? What energies do you pick up from the north and the east and the west and the south? And we are not talking magnetic north here. We are talking true north, because it was examined and found through using the sundial. Okay? And in fact, they talk of the true east, not even the true north. So the east-west axis of the building, of any space, is called the Brahma Sutra. The north-south is known as the Soma Sutra. So any form, when the axes are perfect, gathers the powers and the energies from those directions. And a yantra not only has certain shapes and forms, it has certain arithmetical correlation between form and space. It is also related to the direction. And it has to be made, crafted at the right time. The kala is very important. And it has to be placed or located also at the right time. So all these are part of Vaastu Shastra. So the traditional creator of the Vaastu Shastra, person in the field, is known as the Vishwakarma. And it's not that there are very few of them left. There are thousands of them all over the country. But unfortunately, they have been marginalized. Because today, they need a certificate from an architect or an engineer to build. So what has happened? They've moved into only religious buildings and craft. They don't have a choice. But traditionally, till about 200 years ago, they were the creators of the entire environment. The house, the town, all the buildings, all craft, all vessels and jewelry, all armaments and tools, sculpture, artifacts, everything was under their purview. So they have texts which speak about how to source material, how to bring it, transport it to the location, how to cut and shape, how to build without using mortar. Almost all your old temples in this country are actually standing on self-weight. They don't have a mortar. So enormous skill as craftspeople, as technologists, as engineers. We're talking about a very advanced civilization, which has been brought to its knees. So today it's our responsibility, our collective responsibility, to bring back the wisdom of this amazing civilizational tradition and make it available for our action in the world outside. I'd like to stop with this. Thank you.
So we just have 5 minutes if there's any question.
Can I add one?
Yes, and
Sorry. Sashi, I just want to add one thing because the east-west axis, I want to say that the Matrimandir is shifted 5 degrees east-west and north like towards the east so that it aligns exactly on the 4th of April when Sri Aurobindo landed. And that's exactly the true, that's what I also discovered in the pyramids and in many other sacred buildings. So this happened in Auroville because we wanted to align that the sun rays fall correctly on the 4th of April, but it happens to be exactly 5 degrees, and it happens to be exactly the east-west axis because the sunrise has to fall into it. So it happened in Auroville, but yeah, it kind of reinforces then. Sashi, you want to say any few words on yantra, or shall we just open for questions? Okay, I think
Open it out for questions.
okay,
It's not a subject I can speak about in a hurry.
Okay, I think we have time just for one question because it's been a long day. So here you go.
Shashiji, this is Manu. Thank you very much for that inspiring talk. And I have just one question. If we were to compare Auroville to the temple towns of Tamil Nadu, Sri Srirangam or Chidambaram or Madurai, and consider that the crown of these temple towns is a perfect geometric form. We are all here trying to design the crown of Auroville. How justified is it to consider that this circular sacred form, which Mother called Mahasaraswati, the symbol of sweetness and love, how justified is it to actually stick to that sacred form of the circle?
See, the three shapes have been talked about, all three shapes, which means the square and the rectangle, the circle and the oval and all the derivatives of the circle, the octagon, the polygon. All three have been spoken about in the Vaastu Shilpa Shaastra. The square and the rectangle have been given the position of sattvika energy, which means when you inhabit a square or a rectangle, which also means the cube and the three-dimensional rectangle. It means any one of them. There is a possibility for your inner energies to be at balance. The octagon, the polygon, is considered to be Rajasic in energy, which means it's very high frequency. It is not stable like the square and the rectangle. It is in movement. Okay, so the polygon has been recommended not for residences, but it can be for public buildings. It can be for the form of the town. Similarly, the circle is seen as tamasic, and tamasa here should not be taken in the other Vedantic meaning of negativity. That means dullness or things like that. Tamasa here literally means heavy. Okay, so the tamasa form is considered to be very suitable for communities or neighborhoods or towns. It is also suitable for public buildings. It can also be used for temples. So the tamasic form or the circular form, the oval form, is capable of investing tremendous energy in the people who occupy it, but because it has a very poor orientation, you seldom get a feel of which direction it is unless you see the sunrise. It is not considered suitable for residences. Because in residences, the idea of orientation is supposed to have been very, very critical. Okay, so it's not that there is anything negative about it. But my consideration would be, within that circular form, how are you locating individual units? Are they going to have a relationship with the direction or not? That would be my question. Are those forms or those shapes capable of creating a relationship with the cardinal directions? Only then it's a yantra. Otherwise, it's not a yantra.